Hello and welcome to the Builder's Office. For the new year, 2023, here we go. My name is Hugh. I want to thank you for joining us today and just start off by saying that it's a new year. We're looking forward to some really good things, and this year wanted to try out something a little bit different, and here we are on site, and you'll be able to hear some crazy banging, probably even see it if you're watching this on YouTube, and you'll be able to get a hold of us with this episode, just going through things out on site. And throughout the year, I'm going to go and visit some other people that I do know, and probably some people that I don't know as well, just so that we can get a little bit more of an authentic feel to what a builder's office generally feels like, and then what you can see can happen in the background, and little bits of information that might be able to help you out there, the listener, the viewer, be able to see what goes on behind closed doors, because we all know that, a builder's office is a different world to live in, and with the way the last couple of years have been, everything's changed, and it's just a very interesting place. So don't mind the banging if you're listening. The banging is a couple of guys just doing some work here at the office for this builder that I'm speaking to today. And so I just thought I'd jump into it now and have a chat with Josh Lean here. So he runs a really quite nice building company up here in Jindabyne. And so we'll hand it over to Josh now, and he can introduce himself and tell us a little bit about where you are, what you do in the world, and the kinds of things that you love about the building industry.
Thanks, Hugh Bags. So I run Lean 2 Constructions. It is my little prodigy. I started subcontracting 15 years ago, and then got to the point where I wanted to go out and do my own thing, and then into what it is now. So we run a crew of 9. We specialise in the custom high-end market. We do a little bit of passive as well. We want to get more into passive, but sort of up here in the conditions that we're in the snowy mountains, we already have an element of passive building going on. It's been one of those things. It's just keeps growing and growing, and we're all flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, but it's good fun. We've got a good crew. We've got a few apprentices, so we're teaching everyone else and trying to pay it forward a little bit as well. So that's kind of what we're about. Yeah,
and look, it's a beautiful part of the world, and I guess one of the things that comes in when you're living in such an awesome place is the types of homes that you actually get to build, whether it's stuff for holiday makers, or whether it's the owners that live in the area and they've got businesses themselves. Do you get to experience a lot of variety with what you do? And what would you say is one of the best things when you do get to build a place in such a not so much remote area, but a place that is distanced from a lot of the suppliers?
We're still regional New South Wales, even though we're one of Australia's premier tourism destinations. I think a year or two ago we overtook the Great Barrier Reef for visitors, only for a year, and it was around COVID. But so we have a lot of people here, and there is a lot of play money, I guess, is a way to say it.
Yep.
However, we're still at the end of the freight line, and I can have to wait 8 to 12 weeks for materials sometimes. So COVID definitely blew that out and made that a bit more of a prominent challenge. So we had to learn to put a bit more lead time on our material orders and stuff like that. But as far as the houses are concerned, our crown jewel project at the moment is a 500 square metre, fully automated, semi-passive, big custom high-end monster. But it's like almost a beach-style build, but it's nestled right up on top of a saddle that's overlooking the western foreshore of Lake Jindabyne. So, you're building these coastal influence houses, but you've got to build them to snow loading and wind loading and all that sort of thing. So we get to do some cool architectural stuff, but then the challenge comes into building it within the environment that we're trying to build it into. So it can be quite challenging at times.
Yeah, definitely.
A good challenge, because you always feel good at the end of the project. You go, yeah, we got around that, we got it done.
Yeah, so when it comes to like the passive houses, do you find that a lot of the clientele that you do have around here, they understand a lot of those particular challenges when it comes to designing a home and building a home in the area? Do you find that they are aware of that when you first have a chat with them, or do you find that you're spending a lot of time sort of semi-educating them on the experience out here and what they're going to, what they need to expect when it comes to building around this area?
Yeah, good question. I would say about 80% don't know.
Yep.
So, we have a fair bit of passive methods built into our general building practices that we do here. So we'll always try and seal up around our openings, and we'll generally try and keep the roof cavity as sealed as possible. By no means are we taping the whole structure so that it's airtight, but a lot of the times once we get our buildings to lock up, they're very temperature level, like they'll stay at about 22 degrees for most of the time without any heating running, just from the solar activity coming through the windows and the thermal bridging from outside to inside. But yeah, a lot of the clients that we get, we'll start talking about their design and everything like that, and then once you start getting a bit of pricing together, that's when some people get a bit of a shock at the beginning, because they go, oh, it's more expensive than we thought. And it's like, well, in spring you can almost have a 30-degree spread of temperature in 12 hours. So the way we build, it combats that. So it tries to keep everything level. And then you start explaining that, we tape sills and, we waterproof a certain way and all this sort of thing. That's when they start to understand it a bit better. But until they actually see it happening on site, they still don't truly grasp it until they actually see it, which is something I would like to start doing this year as well, start educating a bit more on our socials so that people can actually see it happening.
Yeah, that's wicked.
Yeah, so that would probably be the main challenge, is even though you explain it to them and sit them down, them understanding it, and then the time it takes from that to happen to when it actually happens on site. Generally we find them go, oh, that makes a lot more sense, like once they see it in person.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's all those general little things that really help. Just keeps the temperature good. You don't have any drafts in your house. Combats your black mold and with ventilation problems and stuff like that. So
yeah, because that can be a huge issue, and I've spoken about it in previous episodes.
Yeah.
Where the issues with black mold in homes, because of either being oversealed or get water damage because of leaks in roofs that can come through, or burst water pipe, or flooding like what's happened in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Around pretty much all of Australia, you see some of these places like your Lismores or Shepparton and any areas like that where they're just inundated with water. But then, of course, they're also flame zones.
Yep.
Where when it comes to the fire ratings and that sort of thing. So you seal up a house so much, and a lot of practice many years ago was to seal the homes up and get them as tight as possible, and basically limiting ventilation in the homes. Have you seen that there's been a little bit of a change in the thinking around some of that sealing up, so that you can get that ventilation, whether it is mechanical ventilation or it's a system that goes into a home to be able to combat the mold issues that can come from a house that's completely sealed up? And
we have black mold issues here in a lot of the rental properties, because they aren't the building system that was used back around the 60s. So when they first built the Snowy Hydro scheme, there was a lot more immigrants and stuff here, and a lot of the building systems that we used were quite basic, because a lot of your guys from the 1960s were just trying to build a house for what they could. And as honourable as that was, a lot of the places that, you know, the young kids have to rent when they come and do a season is single skin hollow brick that's not filled with anything.
Yep.
There's no battens on the wall. There's no like sarking. There's no condensation barriers. There's no nothing, right? So like a lot of your rentals and stuff are just constantly condensating from the heater being on inside the house, especially if it's gas heating, and then the cold temperatures outside overnight, all of a sudden you wake up, it looks like it's been raining on your windowsill inside the window. So there's a lot of black mould there. So then I guess the systems that we implement in our building practice generally is the happy balance that we strike. You still get a little bit of ventilation, but you're not closing the building off to the point where you have to mechanically ventilate it. But in saying that, we have got guys that do our air conditioning install that on our projects. I had them just do it in here, that's why I'm doing that. But yeah, so they also do all our underfloor hydronic heating. They also do our mechanical HVAC. And then we've got a mob in Canberra that we deal quite closely with, and they supply our really good vapour membranes and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely when you start closing off the ventilation into and out of a building, that's when you have to start monitoring and managing the humidity inside the building. So which has been a learning curve, absolutely. So
yeah, because you are Passive House certified.
Yeah.
The learnings that you've gotten from that you can implement even into just a standard house, that isn't going to be certified as being a passive house or anything like that.
Yeah.
Are you finding that a lot of people and even architects and designers are sort of leaning towards that more and more at the moment, and sort of presenting that to their clients before they get to you? Yeah,
absolutely. Because it's all about the energy saving factor too, right? So like if your house sits at 22 degrees all year round, your aircon's not working as hard, your underfloor's not working as hard. You don't have to heat. You don't have to have... I mean, you always have your HVAC running so that you're keeping the humidity monitored and controlled. But your electricity bills are going to go down. If you've got solar on your house, then that's going to affect it again. You'll actually probably be storing more than you'll be using. So it opens up avenues to have more battery storage. Eventually, when we get to sell it back onto the grid, you might be able to make a bit of money when you're, generating your own power and stuff. But it's definitely growing. It's Australia, right? I always get frustrated with Australia because we're like 20 years behind the rest of the world. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I think it's probably going to be another 10 years before it really becomes on trend to build a passive house. Like over in Europe, triple glazed windows are the minimum. And most people in Australia still use single glaze on the coast. And, when we come here, like I've had clients before suggest that they just wanted to do single glaze, and it's absolutely not. You need at least double glaze here. So, yeah, it's cool to see the building practices evolve. And I think we're moving in the right direction. And if you get a good architect, they'll be on top of that as well, and they'll want to do that. But it's also sometimes you feel like you're butting your head against the wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you find that you've got a really good team, not just the ones that are specifically in the business, like the girls in the office and the trades on site, but some of that outer team, whether it's the engineers or the architects, the drafts people, when you're having these conversations with them, do you find yourself getting a lot more involved with the client in the architect and design stage?
Yeah, absolutely. The last few projects we haven't been because they'd already sourced that before they'd found their builder. We always really try and encourage our clients to get the builder in from day one, especially if they're passive certified. It's one thing for an engineer, an architect or a drafts person to know what a passive house is, but they're not the ones building it and putting it together. So, if you can get your builder in on the ground floor when you're starting to design everything, you might navigate a few of those problems that'll crop up later on in the build.
If there was one problem that you saw from somebody coming to you without having any involvement in those initial design stages and sort of working through the design to be able to get it so that it is buildable. If there was one problem when it came to all of that, what do you think would be the number one issue that you've found over the years that sticks out and says we think it's better to do it a certain way with us involved compared to just going it alone and seeing what happens without somebody that's going to be in their corner?
Yeah,
to say.
That's another good question. I think generally what we find is it's all the little things. So it's like, the architects and draftsmen don't generally have an intricate knowledge of the building systems that you're going to be building the house with. They have a pretty good knowledge. I don't want to poo-poo all the drafts people and architects. We love you guys. Yeah. It's like trying to cut someone's hair and going into a barbershop and they know what they're doing because they've been doing it for 20 years. And then you come in and you go, I kind of get it. And you might give someone a decent haircut, but you don't have the experience and you can't do it as quickly. And same with building, we come in and you go, we want to use these style of, custom cavity sliding units. And we go, okay, well, we've installed those before. You're going to need a minimum opening size of this in your hallway to accommodate, a hidden cavity slider. So that just the little things like that where, an architect might go, okay, your hallway's a metre wide, sweet, no worries. And it's like, well, you might need a metre 50 or you might, and that would be finish size. So then your frame size needs to be another 20 mil, So all those little things that might get just scanned over and missed. Just those little intricacies, and especially placement of services like your HVAC, your ducts, underfloor manifolds, stuff like that. This big house that we've just built, the top floor is 88 cubic metres. It's like 460 square metres. And then we had to place all the manifolds in places where you couldn't see it. So things like that was not put on the plan. The architects hadn't even thought about it. So yeah.
You don't have to creep, mate. It's all right.
You'll be famous, Haz.
Yep.
Yeah.
You'll be all over the internet, getting on YouTube.
So that's Harry out. Brand new apprentice, actually. Got signed up on Friday. Signed training contracts.
Yeah, good on you, mate.
But yeah, that's probably the worst thing, I think, is just placement of that. And coming into that big job, hadn't had any of that stuff organised, and so when we got on site, we had to sit down and have another meeting and figure out where we're going to put manifolds and where we're going to put controller modules, because it's all automated as well. And no one had thought about where the automation, the KNX system, was going. So I had to get on the phone with the KNX guys and go, okay, what are our parameters? What do we need? So it's just that little extra step that got overlooked, but it's probably the most important thing to be doing. When you're pouring concrete.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. When it comes to services, it's you and I both have the same issue when it comes to the designs coming to us. And even with the last 3 projects that I've completed, where the house has been designed really well, but then getting an aircon system, a ducted aircon system through, where are we going to place it? And we ended up, the client was adamant that they really wanted to have everything up in the ceilings. And then with the way that everything was constructed, with the way that it had been drawn up with the engineering, we had to manipulate so much just to get it through, and I think it went through 6 revisions before we actually got it to where it needed to be. And it went from ceiling, floor, split systems, and all of this
bulkhead
sort of
units.
Bulkhead units. And it goes through this myriad of changes before you get to the final result. But those conversations, a lot of the time you can have those conversations really early on, and a lot of those issues, because we do know the building system and how it can fall apart just from one simple detail being missed early on. And like for you, it's almost like, okay, do we need to put a plant room into the home, and do we need to allow for that? A lot of people, when they're designing, because it might not necessarily be picked up by the people designing it, or an engineer or anything like that, as soon as it gets to us, and we're like, you're going to get a rude shock.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be the bearers of bad news. We never want to be that.
And we always are.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And how crap do we feel when we get to that stage and we're like, oh, well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but what's going on is going to absolutely mortify you, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
But what can we do when we haven't been involved early on?
Yeah, 100%.
We can only do so much.
Yeah.
And bearers of bad news bears, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes we get builders, we get those names very easily, very quickly, and sometimes it's fun.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would most like to see after doing a couple of last few projects that we did had plans and engineering already drawn up.
Yep.
Which, we don't turn a job away if we haven't got that. Sometimes I'd like to. Yep. It depends if the client can get through our qualification process. And if they do, then generally they just need help. So we're happy to provide that help too. But just a services plan.
Yep.
It's something as simple as that you could get a auxiliary engineer to draw you up a plan of what you're doing.
Yep.
And it might cost you an extra $1,500, but the time that it spends with me on site, sitting down with a client, running through that process anyway, it's about the same cost. So you could have all this done, and then we could be more time efficient.
Yep.
Or we can sit down and do it on site after the fact, which both ways are fine. And I probably have a little bit more control because the engineer's not sitting next to me trying to put his 2 cents in.
Yep.
So it swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see a mechanical plan every now and then.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Many years ago, I was working when I was just on the tools, just as a chippy.
Yeah.
And you being from the same background, being on the tools as well, you sort of get into a rhythm with certain things, and certain builders have a lot of things nutted out a little bit better than others. And many years ago, I was working for a builder down in Melbourne, and they had some of the best plans on the face of the planet that I'd ever seen. And they had the services plan. So they had the HVAC, and then they had the heating plan, and then they had, if it had hydronic heating, and then of course it had the layout for where water pipes, so whether it was sewer or whether it was stormwater or anything like that, had all of that on all of their plans. Yep. Now, they weren't a volume builder. They were a medium-sized volume builder, but they were high-end homes.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, they'd have a set of plans for these particular designs that they had, but then they'd get custom homes. But the same effort that went into all those details on their standard plans went into their custom plans. And we know that just getting a design done with them, and mind you, this was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And these guys we know that they were charging anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 back then.
Yeah, okay.
To be able to get things designed for these homes. And yes, they were $1.2 to $3.5 million homes that were being built.
Yeah.
But the detail that went into it made everybody's life on site that much easier, because all the planning had been done well before anything else.
Yeah.
And we appreciated that, and a lot of the time I see, like you do, you see the plans come to you, and you just sort of freak out going, oh, how much extra work's going to be in this, and we've got to allow for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where some of that price shock and everything can come into it for clients. And while we don't want to be doing that, it's one of those things where we've got to be having those conversations early on.
Yeah, I mean, the boys aren't mind readers. They're pretty good. Like, they're out there ripping one of the walls apart. But like on the job, if like I always have big sets of laminated plans. We have QR codes up on our walls so that they can easily just take a picture and they can pull the plans up on the internet. But at the end of the day, if your plans aren't solid, like they're going to do their best. And sometimes they might interpret a set of plans. Interpreting plans is like reading a book.
It is.
Everyone can interpret it a different way. So, if your plans are crystal clear, your building process will be crystal clear.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Definitely. Well, that's been a really great chat, Josh. We are going to do another chat and go into a little bit more detail in some other topics. But I want to thank you for joining me, and
no worries. Thanks for having me.
We'll get into another episode, and we'll chat to everybody later. But thank you very much, and we'll see you next week, guys, for another episode. And 2023, bring it on.